from Hamas and the Israeli government are on their way to Cairo to negotiate a lot of their outstanding issues, and I'm sure they've got quite a few. Just remind us what role the United Nations could actually play at this point, because surely ultimately it's the regional players and the US that really hold the key to solving this.
Indeed, it is the United Nations that plays a very key role, but at the same time, it is the United States that is really playing a key role. Of course, the United States holds a very key and powerful position amongst the United Nations Security Council, and you find that many members, especially when it comes to Israel, will only act if they feel that the United States has the willingness to do so. You have to remember that when it comes to constraining Israel, historically, the United States has not been willing to do that and has used its veto power in many cases where there have been discussions about resolutions, and that's perhaps why we see this sort of parallel track taking place with the role of Secretary of State John Kerry working in conjunction with Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, to release this joint statement. The fact that what couldn't be accomplished in an emergency session here at the United Nations, just in the last 8 to 10 hours or so, has now been accomplished through works that were taking place in Jerusalem.
Kimberly Halkett Kimberly, I think that maybe now we can listen once again to the statement that we had from the spokesperson of the Secretary General. Let's take a listen.
Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and United States Secretary of State John Kerry announced that the United Nations representative in Jerusalem, Special Coordinator Robert Seri, has received assurances that all parties have agreed to an unconditional humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. This humanitarian ceasefire will commence at 8 a.m. local time on Friday, August 1st, 2014. It will last for a period of 72 hours unless extended. During this time, the forces on the ground will remain in place.
Well, that's Stefan Dujarric, who is the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and Kimberly Halkett is still live for us at the United Nations. Kimberly, you hinted at this in one of your previous answers, just the impact that attack on that UN school on Wednesday had, and all the deaths there and all the images that were seen around the world. I mean, you're at the UN, you're also in the US. Obviously, just give us an idea of how much impact that had, not just on the politicians at the UN or elsewhere, but also on public opinion there.
It had a tremendous impact, Barbara, and here's why. The point that was underscored repeatedly by very high-ranking UN officials was the fact that the Israeli army was given notice before that attack on that school took place. In fact, no less than 17 times was the Israeli army notified of the precise location. Further, the argument has been that we heard from the Israeli ambassador here at the United Nations just a few hours ago that they do not attack civilians, and that they would only attack if there was a reason to believe that there were munitions or something being stored in one of these schools. In fact, even accusing Hamas of using civilians as human shields, placing rockets and munitions in schools and mosques and hospitals. But we have the information from the United Nations saying, in fact, that in this one particular case involving the school where we know that 3,300 Palestinians had sought refuge after being told this was a safe place to go with the imminent attack about to occur, that in fact that they had cleared and checked and made sure that there were no munitions, there were no arms, and so these were simply civilians. And that, I think, is what really resonated, not just with high-ranking UN officials, but also with the international community and public opinion. The fact that they're really, in the words of Valerie Amos, the Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs, Palestinians in Gaza, the 1.8 million who have been trying to shelter and seek shelter there, simply had no place to hide. The sheer numbers speak for themselves. The fact that there are now 85 schools serving as shelters, there are more than 220,000 Palestinians seeking refuge in those shelters, and the fact that despite the warnings that were given by the United Nations to the Israeli army in this one case, that a school was still hit. I think that's what really resonated and perhaps gave the traction for this truce that we are now reporting on, that will take place August 1st for at 72 hours that we know, unless it is, of course, extended.
Kimberly Halkett live for us at the UN. Kimberly, thank you. And yes, as Kimberly saying, that truce meant to start at 0500 GMT, so roughly 7 hours from now at 8 a.m. local, meant to last for 72 hours unless extended. And we are being told that delegations from both Hamas and the Israeli government are on their way to Cairo right now on the invitation of the Egyptian government to try and come up with a more durable ceasefire. We will, of course, bring you more developments on that story as we get them here on Al Jazeera.